There seems to be a lack of information on how to change these rear drives on YouTube. So today we're going to show you how to change your paralever rear drive. You're going to start, if you have a later model one, you'll see that the cheap fuckers went to plastic zip ties instead of the old stainless steel band clamps that used to be on the K-bikes. Now, before you go yarding this boot off, you want to see if any oil comes pouring out of this. And while it's not terrible, we have oil here. That is usually an indication of a leaky pinion seal. On a very rare, very rare occasion, it's a leaky output seal at the back of the transmission. I'll bet my left nut again that this has got a leaky pinion. So, doesn't matter, we're replacing this rear drive anyway, because none of these things are shimmed properly at the factory, and we have one that has been properly rebuilt and properly shimmed. So, your next step, obviously after you take the wheel off and the brake caliper, if you can't do that, you're in way the fuck over your head already, stop, have somebody else do it. If you've got that off, you can proceed with peeling this off, peeling the boot back, inspecting to see if any oil comes out. And next, you are going to remove the nut on the torque arm. Two 16mm. Use the socket on the nut side and a wrench on the head of the bolt. I got this side, Sean. You're going to leave this bolt in. You're just removing the nut and the washer. Why are you leaving this bolt in place? For stability. Your next step. This is a fixed pin. Fixed meaning it has no adjustment. The other side has an adjustable pin. So what you are going to do is peel this boot back. You are going to get a heat gun. A hairdryer will not cut it. Or you can use MAP gas if you're careful. We use MAP gas. You're going to heat this pin. Heat the center of the pin. Do not heat this area. Heat the center of the pin. Not that close either. You're going to be here. You want to be careful and keep it angled that way. You don't want to burn this boot. Do you have the socket for that? For the nut? Go ahead. The 36. The 36. The reason you are heating this .30, sorry. You need a 30mm socket. Oh, fucking God. The reason you are heating this is to melt the Loctite. BMW in their infinite frickin' wisdom and lawsuit paranoia has applied Loctite to these. We were instructed at BMW school to stop fucking putting Loctite on these pins. If you don't heat this up and you just crank on it, you are going to destroy the pin. The pin is aluminum. That's if you're lucky. If you're unlucky, you're going to fuck up the threads in the swing arm, and then you're buying a swing arm for $300 or $400 or more. So now that the nut is loose, now you're going to back the pin out. If it doesn't move freely, stop and heat it some more. That's good there. We know it's moving okay. Now we're going to move to this side. Same problem. You have to heat it. Because they put Loctite on it. Yeah, get that out of the way with a wrench. Excellent. And again, heat the pin, not the swing arm. Some claim that heating these with a torch will discolor the swing arm. I have never, ever had that issue. The only times I've had a discolored swing arm or rear drive is from fuel leakage from the fuel charcoal canister, which we threw away yesterday. I want a fucking soup can on my motorcycle. It better be full of soup. Or something edible other than charcoal. We'll go with that. Again, I cannot stress the importance of this needs to move easily. You might need a breaker bar or an extension on your breaker bar to get this to move. Grab a fork tube. Go. And there we see it turns nicely. Just took a little extra grunt. You see all the shit falling? That is Loctite. All this powder down here. Now you're going to bring that almost to the end, but not all the way out. Now you're going to cradle the back of this. Sean's going to remove the two pins. Go ahead with the socket and just unscrew the pins. Now he's going to push the bolt out of the torque arm. Now you're going to tip the rear drive back. And you're going to take it out. Don't worry if the bearing races fall out. They are supposed to be loose. And we'll have a little chat about bearing races in a moment, about these swing arm bearings. Paralever pivot bearings. You'll also notice now, there really isn't much for lube on this. This seems to be a trend lately. Fuck it, it's a drive shaft. Let's save some money and not put much on it for starboard rods. This is a 2004 model. Also a good time to see where our leak is coming from. So stand it on its nose. If it's a pinion seal leak, it's going to drip. Hey, look at that. Drip, 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 drip. So, as I suspected, we have a pinion seal leak, not an output shaft seal leak. You can also look up into the drive shaft and see that there's nothing there. We have a little bit of oil here, but that's because the front end of your paralever rear drive, this part, sits way up in here. It sits here. So it's going to leak oil onto the end of the fucking hollow swing arm. Next you want to get your bearing race. You want to know, you don't want to mix up the bearing races. As we see, this one on the fixed pin, the bearing race for the paralever pivot bearing stayed on the pin. That's okay, we're going to remove that in a minute. Here is the other side. We need this one, but it's hot. What you're going to do next is put this bearing race in to the appropriate bearing, we need to get this propeller shaft out. Stub shaft. So what you want is, you want to be able to grab the ear of the yoke with a punch like that. You see we're hooked in the back. We don't want a reef on this bearing. The bearing race is okay. So I'm going to put a little tension on that. Sean's going to give that a good whack right on the end with a rubber mallet. Good swift hard hit. And there you go. You are removed. You've done no damage to the bearing. Everything is happy. At this point, you can go ahead and do whatever you're going to do with this rear drive. Personally, I ship these out to have them rebuilt. There's only one person in the country, or in North America, that does them right that I'm aware of, and that is Bruno. And that is where this rear drive is headed to. So we're going to put the races back in these bearings because the bearings are fine. We are going to tape around here to hold the bearings in place. We are going to strip this bolt out because we need that on our replacement rear drive. And that's it. You want to grab some tape and get that taped. You can see more of the oil in there now. So at 15,000 miles, this thing has already developed a pinion seal leak. While the pinion seal leak in itself is not a major issue, it is certainly a precursor to a failure of the rest of the rear drive much later on. So this is going to be sent back to be rebuilt, and then it goes back into my stock. This one has already been rebuilt and is ready to be installed. So you've done whatever you're going to do with your rear drive, or you're putting another rear drive on, or you're putting your rear drive back on after you've had it rebuilt, whatever. On this end, you know, I use Staubroug's paste on clutch input splines, but that is because it doesn't fling off as easy as Honda Moly or assembly lube. In this case, we don't care how much flings off and gets around. It's not going to contaminate anything. So you're going to give it a good coat on the splines. Now Sean's going to fit it into place. We're going to worry about phasing later. And now you're going to give it a good whack. Now you're going to pull on it to make sure it doesn't pull out. That's now in place. Now you can lube these splines, and again, we use this product. It works well. It's good for this application. Don't use it on your clutch input splines. Before you go too much further, you want to clean all this grease and shit off the pins. You want to make sure there's no Loctite in the threads. There's a little bit there, so Sean's going to run over those with a pick. We're going to actually remove this nut from this pin as well, so we can clean those up. We're also going to take 2 of your lug bolts and install them 180 degrees apart from each other. Why, you ask? Because as you're fighting to get this shaft and everything lined up, it's nice to be able to have something to turn to get the splines to engage between the stub shaft and the propeller shaft. We're going to take some more of our Moly assembly lube and fit it into the splines on the end of the propeller shaft / drive shaft. We're good there. Splines on our rear drive have already been coated. Sean is taking care of the swing arm. Again, Sean is taking care of the paralever pivot pins. We'll be installing this in a moment. And I'll take this moment to explain something to you. There's a lot of discussion about how these bearings are not the proper application and these bearings fail all the time and use these bronze inserts, blah, blah, blah. Bullshit. These bearings work just fine. The reason these bearings fail is because people are not torquing them properly. The manual is incorrect as well. Many manuals will say, especially BMW themselves, say torque them to 7 Newton meters. We were told at BMW school in 1999 that that was actually incorrect. They should be torqued 10 to 12 Newton meters, which we will cover here shortly. My point is, unless these bearings are falling apart or they're horribly rusty, you usually don't need to change them, and they're fine. You can re-grease them. You can use assembly lube on them, as long as the bearing is good. If it's, like I said, if it's missing a roller or the cage is broken or something to that effect, you're fucked. You're buying new bearings. I don't like these brass bronze inserts. They don't do anything for me. I prefer the stock bearing. As I said, preloaded properly, they work just fine. We'll cover this in a moment. We're going to take some of our assembly lube and just put a very light coat here. And on our other pin. This is merely going on here to prevent these from seizing inside of the bearing race on the paralever pivot pins. So now our next step is we're going to install the rear drive. After we wipe off this little bit of oil that's been dribbling down onto the torque arm. Clean up our shaft. And actually I'll give Sean, well, maybe he's going to get lucky. Push the torque arm down out of the way. Now you can guide that in place. You see that fit right in. We're going to give this a turn. This is why the lug bolts are attached. There we go. Of course, I didn't realize Sean has the bolt out of the frickin' shock, but that's because this is also getting replacement shocks. Now, get your socket. Get your fixed pin. Do you need to come up? Level that out so your hole is, you're all squared up on that side. You're too high on my side. This would be way easier with 2 fucking hands. Do not fuck up and cross-thread these pins. If you do, you'll be buying new pins. These pins are over $50 each. You may end up buying a swing arm. And that swing arm is, God, $300-400. Now your fixed pin, you're going to screw this in all the way by hand. Right now, Sean's going to put the torque arm on and put the bolt through it. Up. Buck, lift that back up, please. That's why the fucking jack was there. Usually the bottom of the bottom shock bolt is attached. Today it's not. It's all right. Well, if you can get it, that would be great. If not, fuck it. All right, there. We're in business. Minor oversight on my part. Get your boot lined up. And we're gonna mosey on to the other side here. Now, you want to make sure this is lined, the hole is lined up properly. Put your pin on the socket. Don't, without a ratchet. Don't try doing it with just the pin. You don't get a good feel. Sean's gonna hold the camera. Don't back up too far. I got the rear drive. You're gonna wobble this up and down a little bit, pushing that way towards the other pin. That way, this should screw in all on its own. No drag, no difficulty. Keep shaking till you reach it where you can't turn it using your fingers this way without a gorilla grab. Done. Now we're going to move to the other side and torque the fixed pin. You need to torque the fixed pin first before you torque the adjustable pin. This pin, look it up in your climber book. If you don't own one, buy one. They're not even $50. There's no reason for you to own a motorcycle like this and not have the climber manual. The BMW service manual, I don't recommend for the average person. They're fucking overpriced anyway. Your fixed pin, check your book, but you gotta find the fixed pin is torqued to 150 Newton meters, which is 110 pound-feet. Do this nice and clean. The subframe's not bolted down either. And that's it. Now we go over to our adjustable pin. Here is where I mentioned this center pin in many manuals, including BMWs, at least it used to, say 7 Newton meters. That is inaccurate. That needs to be 10, at most 12 Newton meters, but certainly no less than 10 Newton meters. And it doesn't take a whole lot of effort. Go slow. That's it right there. Not much. Now, you are going to take your nut, spin the nut into place. That nut is torqued to 105 Newton meters. Problem now is, if you try to just put a socket on that and torque it, how do you know that that center pin isn't turning as well? Some people put paint marks on and then they go back and forth and they fiddle fuck around trying to figure it out, trying to get it to the right place. That's how you end up crushing the bearing and fucking up the bearing cage. There is a proper tool for this. I don't recommend you buy it from BMW because the fucking whores are like charge $400 for it. All the tool is a deep socket cut out as such so you can fit an Allen wrench in here and hold the pin as you torque this lock nut. So you set your torque wrench to 105 Newton meters, which is 78 pound-feet. We hold our Allen wrench in place. Make sure your socket fits firmly onto the nut. And we're there. You are now done with that part. Don't forget your torque arm. That gets torqued to 45 Newton meters. Install the washer. Install the nut. Again, these are 16 millimeter. You want to use the socket on the nut side and a wrench on the bolt head side. That applies for most anything if you're new to wrenching. It is less effort to turn a nut than it is to turn the entire bolt. and that's it. Your next step is going to be making sure that this boot is fed into place. It fits in this groove all the way around. Sometimes easier to do with a 90-degree pick. Sometimes you don't need it. If you got two people, it usually goes pretty easy. You get that side? Mm-hmm. It's on? It's falling off on my side. All right. Now for the comedy act. Don't order an old stainless steel band clamp from like a K1200LT or anything to put on here. They don't fit. When they redesigned the swing arm, they fucking changed the size of the end as well. So unless you have a source for different size band clamps, an aftermarket source, you're stuck using BMW zip ties, which are part number 33172335139. They're stupid money. They're like $2.56 or something a piece. But they're the only ones that are narrow enough to fit in this groove. That is the problem. There's no issue finding longer tie wraps. As I'll show you, I have plenty that are of the proper length, but they're too wide. They don't fit in between the grooves, and what happens is they end up rolling over the back and coming off. So again, BMW, it's BMW stand for Bikes Made Weird, gotta be fucking different. They have their own goofy ass size tie strap. So I generally put these so that the ugly end of it is on the back side by the wheel. So just for the shits and grins to get it started. Let me get the first grab, gotta give it a turn. And get that down on the other side, looking at the back of the bike, probably in about the 8 o'clock position. Push the boot forward, make sure it's in place. Get your pliers onto the end of this and snug it up as best you can. Side cutters. Cut that off nice and clean. That part is done. Now for the second bit of misery. You need the same damn thing for the smaller one. Ooh, can I cheat and actually use an aftermarket one? Nope, too short. So, here goes another $3. We have to do the same thing for the rear. And we want to push this boot back as much as possible. That is good. And again, I'm going to give it a tug with the pliers. Cut it off so I can have a better grip. One more click, that's all I wanted. Snip that off. That part is done. Sean's going to grab our green marker. We are going to mark that this was torqued, that was torqued, and we're not going to mark the other side because it would look like shit. And we know that that's the first item to be torqued during this assembly anyway. The last part of this video, we are going to torque our drain plug. This has been rebuilt, so there's no oil in it. Crank that into place with a new crush washer, crush seal. This gets torqued to 23 Newton meters. Very good. Next, you are going to put 230 cc's of 75 140 GL5 type gear oil into this. All paralever rear drives take 230 cc's. I recommend in any paralever rear drive that you use synthetic. I don't care who it comes from. I use Spectro. I feel it's the best, but use whatever you can get. Use synthetic, 75 140. These came with 80 W90 GL5 gear lube because it's cheap. Run synthetic in these. I don't recommend using synthetic in the engine. That's a whole different subject. Transmission and rear drive, definitely use synthetic. We're going to unscrew the funnel. We take the funnel away. You'll see the fluid level is right up at the bottom of the threads, which means it would just touch the tip of this fill plug. You do not need a new crush seal on the fill plug as long as the fill plug has a crush seal on it, as long as it's not leaking. That also gets torqued to 23 Newton meters, same as your drain plug. The last thing I'm going to cover here is your ABS pickup sensor. Some have shims, some do not have shims. If this, like in this situation where we're changing the rear drive, we're going to measure that later on after the wheel is on, because on this model the brake disc and the ABS ring gear are carried on the wheel, not on the rear drive. So we have no way of measuring that until the wheel is on. So be aware of that. If you're using the same rear drive, you're going to use the same amount of shims, but you should still check it. The measurement, the clearance between the ring gear and the end of the ABS sensor should be, what is it, 0.45 millimeters to 0.50 millimeters. That's the operating range. Anything more or less than that, you're going to have bizarre acting anti-lock brakes. There is one setting that will render your brakes useless because it always thinks, the computer always thinks the brakes are going to lock up and the brakes will never be able to be applied. So, and that's it. You now have a properly mounted rear drive that is hopefully rebuilt, or you were able to do whatever you wanted to do with it. Or if you were just disassembling something else, at least you got it back together properly. And now you're ready to put your wheel on. Your wheel lug bolts are torqued also to 105 Newton meters. Your brake caliper bolts are going to be torqued to 30 Newton meters. This bolt for the ABS ring sensor, I believe, was 8 Newton meters. You can just tighten it with a wrench. Don't go nutty, it doesn't need to be too tight. That's it. I hope that was helpful. As always, thank you very much for watching.